with former Director Comey. I'm a proud Republican. I believe in law and the FBI and truth. But I also know that there was a lot of politics being played early on in this investigation, including regarding the Steele dossier and the failure to disclose the fact that the Hillary Clinton campaign was behind financing it, and also the failure before a FISA court to make sure that that was known and apparent. And then what I subsequently found out this week is that with regard to Michael Flynn, FBI Director Comey, snuck 2 agents into the White House, unbeknownst to the White House Chief of Staff and the White House Counsel's Office, in order to presumably get him to make false statements about things that they already knew the answers to because they had the transcript of the Kislyak conversation. Right. So it strikes me in the first instance, how is whatever Flynn said material to any investigation, since it seems that their apparent purpose was to obtain his statements and then be able to use those against him, as they did to go to Sally Yates, then the acting Attorney General, in order to try to have him removed from his position as National Security Advisor. In other words, the intelligence community, what the president has characterized as the deep state, was out to get this guy. Now, I don't know.
Well, but the Mueller...
Well, I have always wondered, given the fact that I think it was a surprise even to President Trump that he won the election, that making a claim with regard to Russia collusion in the summer of an election year, when it wasn't even clear that he would win the presidency, always seemed, in my judgment, to be a stretch. He didn't. The Trump campaign had nothing to trade with Russians because it presupposes that with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, that they were in a position to be making promises as to what would happen once the Trump administration took office. That presupposes that he was going to be elected, something that even they didn't believe. And then I look at your caption here about 6 different areas where the Trump administration is under investigation. I have to laugh because during the Clinton administration, there were 7 independent counsels in place, including my own with regard to Whitewater, which was just one of 7. So, I get the politics of this, and
but that doesn't negate the fact that those are still, those investigations are very much underway.
If I can make a quick closing point, I know time is short. I think
according to the paper, that Russia used every major social media platform to help elect Trump, that all of Moscow's messaging was intended to benefit the Republican Party, specifically Trump, and that on Facebook alone, Russia's campaign reached 126 million people. It reached another 20 million people on Instagram. With us now, one of the Washington Post reporters that obtained this report and is breaking this news, Craig Timberg, and our chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter. Craig, how is any of this different from what we've already learned about Russian interference? Let's start there.
This in many ways is the report we've been waiting for. It's sweeping, it's comprehensive, it uses the fullest data set we've seen yet from the companies who turned over lots of information to the government that they didn't turn over to anybody else. And so it doesn't exactly tell us things we didn't suspect or haven't heard, but it puts it all together in a new way, and it's very comprehensive and compelling. I feel like they kind of reverse engineered the entire Russian disinformation campaign in this one report.
In your report, you write that this report found the Russians, quote, worked even harder to support Trump while in office. While in office. In your report, you write that this report found the Russians, quote, worked even harder to support Trump while in office. While in office. How so?
Every platform that these researchers tracked posted more often after the election. YouTube in particular.
Specifically Trump. And that on Facebook alone, Russia's campaign reached 126 million people. It reached another 20 million people on Instagram while in office. How so?
Every platform that these researchers tracked posted more often after the election. YouTube in particular went up by some remarkable degree. And so we tend to think of this narrative in terms of coming up to election day, but actually intensified after election day, and was still intensifying when the social media companies took this data, took these accounts down from the Internet Research Agency in Russia, sometime around the middle of 2017.
Now, this Russian campaign, as you mentioned, Brian, reached 126 million people on Facebook, another 20 million on Instagram. Is that a lot in the world of social media?
Yeah, on websites where there are billions of accounts, 100+ million is a very big number. It doesn't mean that every person who viewed this content was manipulated or persuaded by it. But obviously, the Russians didn't need to persuade 100 million people. They only needed to persuade a relatively small number of people in order to affect the outcome of the election. Now, whether that is what actually happened or not, I don't think we will ever be able to say for sure.
Russia, sometime around the middle of 2017.
Now, this Russian campaign, as you mentioned, Brian, reached 126 million people on Facebook, another 20 million on Instagram. Is that a lot in the world of social media?
Yeah, on websites where there are billions of accounts, 100 plus million is a very big number. It doesn't mean that every person who viewed this content was manipulated or persuaded by it. But obviously, the Russians didn't need to persuade 100 million people. They only needed to persuade a relatively small number of people in order to affect the outcome of the election. Now, whether that is what actually happened or not, I don't think we will ever be able to say for sure. But with all the talk lately about who knew what when, new elements about collusion, new claims about the Mueller probe, this takes us back to what really happened and just how concerted the Russian effort was to try to persuade voters. And like I said, it didn't take 100 million people to be persuaded. What happened because of these Russian trolls, these hackers and criminals, is that it changed the conversation around the election. And I think most importantly, Anna, as you pointed out, this reporting from these researchers is that it ramped up even more intensely after Election Day. It makes you think about Trump's relationship with Russia, Trump's relationship with Putin after Election Day in the early days of the presidency and what was going on. Why were these Russian agents still trying to affect Americans' thinking?
One of the details, Craig, in this report is that it found that Russians targeted African Americans specifically with misleading information about how to vote. Tell us more about that.
Well, one of the major parts of this campaign was keeping people from going to the ballot box, people who would have voted for Hillary Clinton, at least in the view of the Russians, apparently. And so there was all this messaging around, hey, we can't trust elections, or Hillary Clinton isn't any better than Donald Trump. And we've known that for a while, but to see it put together in a single comprehensive report is really impressive. And it looks like the effort to reach African Americans was nearly as extensive and as effective as the effort to get conservatives activated around gun rights or around immigration issues. So really, they worked both sides of the coin, if you will, really effectively.
And some of it was about promoting conservatives and encouraging people to vote for Trump. Others was about discouraging voting for Clinton. But all of it was in the same direction, right? All of it was in the Trump direction, even though they were pressing different buttons for different people.
Craig, does this report reach any conclusion as to how this may have impacted the election?
It does not wrestle with that question. And of course, on some level, it's unanswerable, right? There's no way we can go and run the election again and take this out and see what happened. But it does suggest that the campaign was really shrewd, was sophisticated in its understanding of American politics, was sustained, and kept going even longer than most of us really understood. And in fact, there's no reason to think this ended in 2017. I mean, the social media companies, Facebook and such, were still taking down accounts affiliated with this, right up until almost to the midterm election. Now, this report doesn't reveal what happened with that kind of data, but there's no reason to think the Russians stopped. I mean, why would they?
Let me read just a quote here. It says, social media have gone from being the natural infrastructure for sharing collective grievances and coordinating civic engagement to being a computational tool for social control, manipulated by canny political consultants and available to politicians in democracies and dictatorships alike, Brian.
Right, and that applies to more than just Russia, more than just one foreign government. It happens to be Russia that is the central focus of this probe. But other foreign actors, other groups are also able to use social media in this way. And Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Google, they have belatedly woken up to these facts way too late. Our colleague Donny O'Sullivan has some new reporting that suggests maybe these researchers were only given the bare minimum of help from the social networks. Now, we'll have to see what the networks say. Facebook may say that it was enormously helpful to these researchers, but that's been a concern for the past couple of years. How open have Facebook and Twitter been to letting us reconstruct what went wrong in 2016 and what might still be going wrong today? Because I think as any user of Facebook or Twitter knows, there's been some changes, there's been some improvements in some ways, but it's pretty easy to go down a pretty dark rabbit hole and find a lot of nasty content on social media these days. Some of it just published by Americans, but some of it published by people pretending to be Americans. And that's the root of this report. That's the root of this problem. People that are posing as Americans trying to sow division in our country.
And Craig, as we point out, again, this report suggests that Russians didn't stop once Trump is in office. Do we have any indication if they're doing it right now?
look, there's every reason to believe that they are, but there's also a lot of reason to believe that they got more sophisticated. So as Brian points out, the researchers in the report do take issue with how the social media companies handled the request by the government. Google in particular comes in for criticism for not being more open with its data around how YouTube was used. There's some fairly pointed language about that. But it's also true that the companies are doing more now, and it's also true that the Russians and others are presumably getting more sophisticated all the time.
The background of the woman who killed herself after wounding 3 people at YouTube's headquarters. She was a big star online in her home country, but she believed that YouTube's change in metrics destroyed her income.
The YouTube shooter was ticked off that she made a mere 10 cents, yes, 10 cents, for some of her videos. Nassim Aghdam posted numerous videos on YouTube. In total, an impressive 9 million people watched the videos, but she found that getting famous on YouTube isn't a guarantee of wealth. My revenue for 300,000 views is 10 cents, she angrily wrote on her website. Aghdam's family emigrated from Iran to the U.S. in 1996, and it turns out she's a big social media star there, under the name Green Nassim. But she grew disillusioned with America. If you are superficial, you will think it is heaven here, she said. You will see that it is worse than Iran. 2 days after 9/11, she obtained a student pilot certificate, but authorities say she has no known links to terrorism. The animal rights activist was photographed at a PETA protest in San Diego in 2009. She held a fake dagger and painted blood on her face. Some viewers who watched her bizarre videos questioned her sanity. In response, she posted, "I don't have any special mental or physical disease, but I live on a planet filled with disease, perversions, and injustices."
Him getting on a plane and flying somewhere is like you going to Publix. I mean, it's something he just does every week.
You use the phrase evil genius. Do you think that
I'm sorry. I mean, that's the thing I shouldn't have said. But that's what people are. I mean, that he's this, But he's a highly intelligent. There's absolutely no. And this is the other part that I want to stress with this. That it doesn't matter that they won't chase people, but people are saying, "Oh, he must have had help." Steve had no. That he's this, But he's a highly intelligent. There's absolutely no. And this is the other part that I want to stress with this. That it doesn't matter that they won't chase people, but people are saying, "Oh, he must have had help." Steve had no help. Steve didn't take help. It did not take a village for Steve. Steve was an I'm sorry. Please don't. I'm using a colloquial. I was about to use a colloquial term that if you wanted to hang out with Steve, you hung out with Steve, but you had to understand Steve was a little quirky. Here's the story. Here's how Steve is. I would go, when I was flying or whatever, if he was in town and I happened to be flying over, I'd stop in where, we'd go to the hotel and stay at the hotel for a couple days or something and sit under the cabana or something like that. But with Steve, it was like he'd spend, I'd get to partake of a bunch of thousands of dollars of comps on the hotel, but Steve would say, "Oh, can you go get me a sandwich?" Who have no reason to tell you that he was a nice guy. People who used to pay him rent. The story about our apartments that we have. The guy says, "Oh, and by the way, the place sucked when we bought it. We fixed it up and made a nice place for these people to live." And Steve gave them cheap rent because we wanted happy people, nice people in our apartments. He said, "Yeah, he had a quirky sense of humor." What the hell is a quirky sense of humor? People watch movies where they butcher little kids. What the hell are you? This is why everybody, and here's my diatribe for the day. This is what everybody's so scared about right now. Because there's just nothing there. I hope the hell they find, when they do the autopsy, that there's a tumor in his head or something. Because if they don't, we're all in trouble. Because Steve was just, Steve's dead. You can't say anything bad about him anymore because who cares? Say whatever you want about him. It's not going to hurt me. something horrible happened to my brother. And whatever happened to him in his head that made him go over the edge like this, you don't, when the lights go out at night and you lay your head on your pillow, this is you and me. I mean, come on, guys. This is you and me. I mean, come on, guys. This is what everybody's so scared about right now.
CNN and every channel had this shooting, and I looked again, and they said Stephen Paddock. I asked her, was he sick like me? She didn't want to talk about it.
Raw emotion from Bruce Paddock as he recalls the night his brother Stephen became the deadliest mass shooter in U.S. history.
So I hung up and I saw that he killed a whole bunch of people. And I realized that being sick like me would make you want to kill a bunch of people.
Some developing news right now. The brother of the Las Vegas concert gunman has been arrested in North Hollywood. KCAL9's Amy Johnson is live. She is in North Hollywood with more. And Amy, these are some pretty serious accusations.
They sure are, Sandra. We're talking about 59-year-old Bruce Douglas Paddock. He was arrested here at the Four Seasons Healthcare and Wellness Center this morning. That's that brown building there. He was arrested on charges of child pornography and sexual exploitation of a child. Now, Paddock, seen here, is the brother of the Las Vegas shooter, Stephen Paddock. Now, the investigation into Bruce Paddock began before the Las Vegas shooting. In fact, I spoke to a man who didn't want to go on camera, who said Bruce Paddock was actually bragging about his brother after the shooting rampage, announcing to people in the nursing and rehab facility that it was his brother and that he was glad he killed those people.
I think it's terrible. I really do think it's terrible. It's a horrible, very horrible situation.
Welcome back to Harvard. The crazies are still on the rise. A study by the Southern Poverty Law Center finds that the number of anti-government patriot groups has exploded over the last 4 years. According to the study, these groups typically believe that the federal government is conspiring to take Americans' guns away from them and destroy their liberties as it paves the way for a global one-world government. Well, these are groups like the Constitution Party, We Are Change,
which is neither left or right, a racist right-wing hate group. Let's find out why.
Welcome back to Harvard. The crazies are still on the rise. A study by the Southern Poverty Law Center finds that the number of anti-government patriot groups has exploded over the last 4 years. According to the study, these groups typically believe that the federal government is conspiring to take Americans' guns away from them and destroy their liberties as it paves the way for a global one-world government. Well, these are groups like the Constitution Party, We Are Change,
DWRC. I really wanted to talk to you and ask you about your impressions of Obama's term of his presidency. Are you happy with the way it's going?
Are you at WRC in Washington?
New York City. New York City.
WRC. What's WRC?
We Are Change.
I don't know what that is.
You did bring us up once.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what you are.
Well, just one thing. You brought us up as a right-wing racist group on your channel.
I don't know anything about you.
You said We Are Change is racist and right-wing teabaggers. Yes, you did say that. Can you tell me why you think that of myself?
Do you have that on tape?
Yes, we do. We can pull it up right now. MSNBC slanders We Are Change. We are
MSNBC.
Yes, you on your desk were sitting and you mentioned We Are Change, and you said We Are Change is a group of right-wing racist teabaggers. I really would like.
When was that?
This was when you had Mark Potak on, and our group was not related in any way, shape, or form.
Mark Potak was the Southern Christian.
Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah, I mean we could Google it right now, but you did say that on record, on air. If we just look up Chris Matthews, and I really would love just to get a clarification.
Tell me about your group.
Well, we're independent.
I obviously knew about it that night for the program, for the issue that came up.
Yeah,
just a minute. I thought you made me think that you were WRC in Washington.
Well, we're in New York.
You should have told me that.
But I really would love a clarification on why you think we're racist when we're independent, grassroots, not supported by left or right. Bill O'Reilly called me a jihad-loving liberal on Fox News. So it's interesting that you like.
Watch this debate that you interrupted my attempt to watch it. So let me watch it.
I know, but you did slander our news organization. I'll look up the thing and I'll show it to you.
I don't want to see it.
Well, we just want some clarification for your slandering.
You're not going to get it from me tonight.
But if you're going to say something about my organization that slanders us, I want at least to talk to you like a man about it and understand why you said
Talking
it.
to me, and my answer is no comment. All right, that's my answer.
But why would you say and slander us?
See your point.
But if you don't even know what you're talking about, why slander a national organization like this?
He worked in the Reagan administration for 6 years, and by CNN's chief political.
Now, the last time I talked to Anderson Cooper, things really didn't go that well. Anderson, what influence do you think the CIA has when it comes to mainstream media?
Dude, you're being ridiculous.
To manipulate the news and mainstream media? So Anderson Cooper has 3 security guards all around him now. He actually hid in a car for me. Get just one statement from you. But this time he actually talked. Hey Anderson, we had a great interview last time. I was wondering if you get a chance to look into Operation Mockingbird? You know what that is.
You're talking about something, what, from the 1950s, dude?
1970s official declassified program, how the CIA infiltrated the mainstream media from the higher up.
Right.
It's declassified.
I read about it in college, yes, I do. Nice.
Do you think it's something that could possibly be happening today?
I have no comment for you, thanks, dude.
Why not? I mean, you didn't have any journalistic training except CIA training. I mean, but do you feel it's an issue of concern when it comes to kind of domestic American coverage? Now, I don't want to be considered rude or mean when I told Anderson Cooper to his face that he received no journalism training at all except for training by the CIA, but that's actually stated on his own Wikipedia, and he admittedly was trained to be in the CIA when he was in college and received no journalism training. But if you're interested in journalism training, I'm actually doing a full-fledged one-on-one boot camp course. There's laughing, yoga, there's tequila shots, there's running exercises. There's also a full-day training seminar with me teaching you one-on-one how to do everything that I'm doing in Acapulco, Mexico. If you're interested, check out the link below. And if you just want to check out the conference that's happening down there, there's also another link there just to check out the conference. And it's one of the best conferences.
Luke is there on the ground. Oh shit, shit. Oh shit. Fucking journalist, you motherfucker! Immediately disperse. You must leave the immediate vicinity. When politicians need a reality check, he faces them and confronts them head on.
What happens when you worship Moloch at the Bohemian Grove?
So many people who don't know that. And they don't know it because